Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again. Now it's time for episode 188 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from a English singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist who's been gaining some critical attention in 2013 with his debut album under the project name for which he's most known for. Of course, I'm talking about the musician known as Archie Marshall, aka King Krule, who's also done some albums as Zoo Kid, as well as an album in 2015 under his own name. And now I'm here to review his highly anticipated sophomore record as King Krule, which dropped on October 13th, so Friday the 13th of October 2017. And the album is called The Ooze. And as you can see, this is my CD copy of it right here. Definitely wanted to review this album because this has become one of my favorite records of 2017. In fact, I think I love it more than its like spot and my top 50 list of the year actually gives me credit for. It's fine. And here's the back, which the album cover is kind of vague, but it is kind of cool if you sort of look at the context of the music. This is on a couple of labels, XL Recordings as well as his own label, True Panther Sounds, that he's put out all his like different projects on. Here's the inside, which has photos of like different people, which I think these are like all the different people that like contributed instrumentation and additional vocals and spoken word parts too. Then of course there's a photo of Archie Marshall wearing a tiger mask. And the track listing is there. There's over 19 tracks on this album, and it's over an hour and 6 minutes. And there's a little insert, which is basically just the album cover and the liner notes. So not too many bells and whistles going on here, but, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, there's the disc. And that's the CD packaging for the latest King Krule album, The Ooze. And as you can see from the very odd album title, The Ooze, you can see that this is kind of a bit of a concept record, in this case dealing with kind of the inner gunk of our minds. So there's definitely going to be themes of depression and anxiety and stuff like that. And this sort of sees Archie Marshall sort of in a phase of like losing his mind and stuff like that. You know, it's sort of like the topics Will Toledo addressed on that last Car Seat Headrest record, even though they're both very different in style. So this is kind of a self-indulgent splurge that, you know, isn't necessarily for everyone, and at times it can be a little self-referential, but still at the same time there's definitely a lot about it that makes it a very solid release throughout. The opening track, Biscuit Town, right off the bat, pulls us in with a very sexy groove with slinking electric piano and guitars, as well as a kind of trippy drum machine accompanying it as well. And right off the bat, Archie Marshall just pulls me in with his very inviting, very British voice, sort of coming in with some very kind of bizarre, wry humor with his lyrics that manages to stay really memorable. And I love his vocals on here, which makes the lyrics on here that much more engaging as he says stuff like, "I seem to sink lower in Biscuit, which is kind of a vague reference. Not really sure what he means by Biscuit Town, but at the same time, definitely a very cool opener for the album. Like, the grooves throughout this album are definitely fantastic. The first single to be released from the record is the song Dumb Surfer, and this is the first track that I got to hear from this album, and it was accompanied by that really odd, like, zombie-filled music video. Which is pretty cool. Cool, and just as odd and strange as the song itself here is. And I love all the attention to detail that he brings in with the instrumentation. Some crisp drums on here, really cool guitar solo in the middle, as well as that kind of beefy saxophone. It does sound really nice on here. There too. It's definitely a very unique track that's very like genre bending as it blends together like jazz with hip hop and punk together into one pretty trippy combination. And I also love the kind of ghost-like background vocals. And the kind of sinister laughs, really showing him sort of doing a bunch of really odd stuff with his voice, but doing so well with sort of channeling his emotions through it. A few other singles that were released for the album include the song Cheech 1, which is definitely an even drearier cut, but no less interesting, as it does a good job of incorporating all the kind of alien-like elements, like the kind of pitch-shifted backwards vocals and the kind of atmospheric echo effects on the lead vocals and the background vocals as well, and features a kind of rainy, like electric piano riff, over a kind of sparse drum machine, and I love all the different attention to detail brought in with the instrumentation. There's some really cool like barroom piano, and then we hear elements of sax and some swagger from the percussion instruments, including the triangle and the glockenspiel. And this sort of sees Archie Marshall hearing this ooze character in his brain, sort of asking him like where he's coming from, but sort of telling her that it won't work in this kind of depression that he's dealing with. So our character here on this album is very kind of apathetic and stuff like that, and has kind of stopped trusting people and only gets along with some, which he references on the track Visual, which is definitely kind of a swaggering, off-kilter punk track that does sound really nice, and I love how he goes off vocally on that cut. And I love how at the end of Cheech 1, the song kind of fades out and like gets slower, so the vocals are getting pitch shifted and stuff like that. Really interesting how it sort of like melts. How it kind of like melts like wax at the end. The song Half Man, Half Shark is the third single to come off of the record, and I definitely was excited to hear more of this album after hearing a sample of this track too. Again, it's another song that really does see him sort of exploring the punk side of his music taste. There's like some fuzzy, slightly like lo-fi guitars on the track. track some like crazy drumming on the song, as well. Some like crazy drumming on the track too. Really cool slinking bass line as well. And the vocals on this track. I love how Archie Marshall has the ability to like just go off and kind of like scream into the microphone vocally. Like that part at the end really does show him sort of rising with the climax to the kind of vague subject that he's addressing. So while the subject matter on this record may not be like the most like blunt you're gonna hear, his vocal delivery that he uses as emotional conduit really does make it that much more engaging to listen to. And I love the kind of off-kilter shouts in the background, which are coming from Adam Marshall, who I believe could be like his brother or something like that. And then eventually it does close out with a kind of somber, piano-driven end section. Now I'm going to get into some deeper cuts here. We have the song Slush Puppy, which in a very beautiful and surreal way sort of sees two perspectives, one from the character, like the main character of this album, along with this like odd ooze alien character, which is being portrayed vocally by OK Kaya, and done so beautifully. And I love like all the different perspectives. We have the more kind of calm sort of. We have the more sort of calm point of view from the ooze character, but then we have Archie Marshall basically like going off vocally and kind of just going crazy, going crazy as he's in this sort of awkward phase in his life. So it makes sense. The track gets that much more climactic and once it reaches that end part, which I just love. We have a couple little interludes here on this record. We have, which are called Bedmonsey Bosom Left and Birdmonsey Bosom Right, and the former like features this kind of odd spoken word part that's done in Spanish by a Spanish woman, accompanied by some really cool jazzy instrumentation like vibraphone, as well as the sax providing the kind of vibrating like a really unique rhythm here on the track. And it may be a little odd and kind of hard to decipher at first, but once you listen a little deeper onto this album and get to the track Birdmonsey Bosom Right, you'll definitely see why it makes sense. He put it there because apparently the right interlude like translates the Spanish spoken word in English, and it's done by Archie Marshall's brother, Adam Marshall, and his voice on here kind of sounds as if it's like some like psychologist who's like evaluating the narrator of this album's condition, and it's very beautiful how it kind of symbolizes kind of the whole meaning of the album. One of my favorite tracks on the record, I'd have to say, is the song Logos, which I would say is the most kind of like legitimately hip-hop track on the record, as Archie Marshall happens to be rapping the lyrics. And some very cool elements on here include like I love the ending instrumentation on here. With the kind of jazzy drumming, as well as that really beautiful saxophone solo at the end too. And this is sort of a song where Archie Marshall is kind of addressing how this depression that he's dealing with right now is kind of passed on from his family. Like in lyrics like "I call my mom, she stumbles home," and started talking about how he, along with the inner gunk of his brain, started out like they were like soup together. It started out kind of colorful at first, but then eventually began to turn into gray, and he's turning kind of cold-hearted and apathetic as he's dealing with the same logo over and over again. I love that metaphor right there. And it's so cool how that end section transitions into another little interlude with Sublunary, which the meaning of this track, since it's just a couple of lines, is kind of vague, but at the same time it is cool how it sort of concludes sort of the subject matter of logos. And I think it's so beautiful, the transition of the end section of the previous track into this kind of howling guitar noise. And it has a bunch of pretty odd elements on here, the kind of spacey electric piano, and as well as the chipmunked background vocals, which actually do sound really cool on there. And then it closes out with this odd sampled noise, which I think could be coming from the TV show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I heard that he actually sampled part of an episode from that show in this album, which kind of makes sense because I heard that was a show that he watched during his he would fall into depression of binge watching that show. And we definitely do see his love of different styles of music here really nicely on this record. We get to hear a little bit of smooth jazz with subtle hip-hop flavorings on tracks like Lonely Blue, on tracks such as Lonely Blue, and then we have Cadet Limbo, which is kind of experimental and makes some very playful, odd uses of sample. I really like that kind of off-kilter barroom piano and clarinet that's being sampled at the end of that track. And some cool little echo effects going on that track, like on the vocals, as well as on the vocals, some kind of psychedelic echo effects going on. And I love that guitar riff that hangs in the background, making that cool little which punctuates the instrumental with that kind of sinister synth bass roar really nicely. Nicely. And then we hear his love of punk on songs like I already highlighted the track Visual, and then also the song Emergency Blimp, which features some really cool unusual instruments incorporated as well, a great bongo part on the track, as well as I love that siren-y synth howl that occurs towards the end of the song. Is really cool, and that's a track where I feel Archie uses his voice really well, and he goes off just so well at the end, really showing how punk rock has really influenced kind of his singing style, as well as the way that he plays his instruments as well. And this one sure does have some very unusual key choices, as does the track Lonely Blue, where the key changes pretty much for every measure of the final third of that track. Third of that track. There I would say probably my least favorite track on the record would probably have to be the track A Slide in New Drugs, which starts out kind of cool at first. Some kind of odd pitch-shifted vocals on the track. Over his kind of eerie acoustic guitar playing. And the lyrics do start out pretty interesting, but I don't really care for that end part where the kind of howling synth part comes in at the end. It kind of interferes with the rest of the song. Like, the mixing is a little off here on this track for me to the point where that synth part just kind of, eats it up a little too much. Much to the point where I don't really notice the lyrics as much on here. But like I will say, I really like the title track on here, The Ooze. The Ooze, definitely some very cool elements going on here. Another very jazzy, amazing groove here on the track. And we do have this really interesting, female spoken word part that sort of symbolizes this Ooze character once again. And it's so beautiful how it's kind of intimate and kind of it's kind of odd, but at the same time it's kind of like honey to the ears, and it sounds pretty soothing actually. It was the kind of element that at first I wasn't really too keen on it when I first heard it, but it definitely has grown with me over time as I've listened to this album more and more. More and more, and Archie sort of once again sort of addresses his feeling of loneliness pretty much. So the first line is basically, "Is there anybody out there?" He's sort of wondering if people have left him because they stopped trusting him or not. Him or not. And his vocals on here definitely sound just amazing at the end once they get more chaotic. And the groove on this song is the kind of groove that kind of instantly pulls you in, and even as it kind of fades in and then eventually fades out at the end. And the song Midnight Night 01, Deep Sea Diver, is another one that really stands out to me, that features some really cool guitars that syncopate with the jazz drum samples really well on here. So another song that very well incorporates jazz with hip-hop. It's with hip-hop. And of course it does feature its odd little curveballs like that Spanish spoken word part at the end that comes in at the middle, and at the end there's a sample which sounds like a sample from a 1950s film score or something like that with orchestral stuff, which I'm not sure why he put it there, but it definitely does work there, because it could be sort of some sort of secret romance that's happening between these two characters that are portrayed throughout the album. So it's kind of a mystery, but it's cool how he incorporates those little imperfections. This isn't some foolproof pop formula, so it's not the most accessible thing you're going to hear from 2017, but it's definitely one of the best. And then it eventually closes with La Lune, which very nicely has incorporates a very jazzy guitar and intimate voice with the sample of Raindrops. So it's kind of this cool little like rainy ending vignette for this whole story. Yet for this whole story that closes the album in a really satisfying way. And the samples of raindrops are incorporated like really nicely actually on the last 4 tracks on the album. Sort of seeing this phase sort of slowly but surely kind of coming to a close and creating this whole like circular effect. And this is one of the few songs where I do feel like he uses his voice as emotional conduit really well. And he actually does the same with his kind of sparse guitar playing on the track too. So it's definitely a track that instantly pulls you in, even though it doesn't have all the like odd and like crazy instrumentation elements that were heard for a good chunk of the album. And it's probably the closest to something that he could have done off of 6 Feet Beneath the Moon, even though I've just heard little snippets of stuff from there. So yeah, overall I'm definitely digging this record. It has grown on me over time as I've listened to it. So I was definitely very surprised to see this on a lot of year-end lists. And it's definitely an album I would highly recommend if you like music that's kind of out there and has kind of a vague sort of meaning to it, and you're willing to kind of take some time to just kind of listen to this uninterrupted, and like this album definitely demands some pretty careful listening. This is definitely the record for you. It's some very versatile, clever, groovy, like trip-hop, jazz fusion, jazz indie rock fusion here on this record. I mean, I don't remember the last time I heard something like that. So I'm definitely going with an 8 out of 10 for this latest King Krule album, The Ooze. Definitely highly recommend it. It's not exactly going to hit you on first listen. It's going to take time, but trust me, it's worth it. So anyway, that's my review with the new King Krule album, The Ooze, and I'll see you for episode 189.